Welcome to That's Good Sports. I am Brandon, your fantasy football expert. Perna. Becoming a fantasy football expert is the easiest expert to become because, unlike Michael Scott declaring bankruptcy,
I declare bankruptcy!
All you have to do to become a fantasy football expert is verbally declare you're an expert after looking at a few fantasy football ranking charts. I'm a fantasy football expert! And this episode is about fantasy football wide receivers. They're called wide receivers even though they're the skinniest players on the football field. And it's shocking that Kelvin Benjamin, who took the name wide receiver, quite literally didn't turn out to be the greatest wide receiver of all time, especially in fantasy football. So today I want to tell you which wide receivers will be great again this season, discuss sleepers, and maybe some players to avoid. That's good. Sports. Please, newbies, subscribe to this YouTube channel for continuous, sometimes I make up words here, football coverage. And if you're old, click that notification button so you know when I upload videos. As of right now, today, there's no better option in a PPR league than DeAndre Hopkins. Unless you actually believe Julio Jones might actually be messing around with hitting a 3,000-yard receiving season. Hopkins had 333 points last year because he catches anything thrown his way and is going to have another great year with Deshaun Watson proving to be a reliable ball tosser and Will Fuller getting up to speed early in the season due to last year's ACL tear. Jones, Hopkins, and Michael Thomas are really three guys that you can interchange for your top three receivers, especially if you believe that Antonio Brown is going to underperform without Ben Roethlisberger, which I do. I think he could have the biggest drop in production of any receiver this year, minus an injury scenario. Keeping in the AFC West, Keenan Allen, already a fantasy football stud, could be a top 3 performer after Tyrell Williams left Los Angeles for Oakland. Smart move by Tyrell to leave a team that's an outcast in its own city for another team in a nearly identical situation. Now, this might also be surprising, but Davante Adams ranked second among all wide receivers in 2018 with 330 points, and he didn't play the final week. He had the most targets per game of any receiver last season, just ahead of Antonio Brown. I'm not sure if he repeats that, but the Packers offense should probably become more efficient and creative in 2019, and I think Aaron Rodgers will finally stay healthy. A Rodgers-Adams combo may be the most gettable for 2019 because Green Bay was so underwhelming last year, I think people might have forgotten they even exist. Fantasy sleepers. Chiefs receiver Demarcus Robinson is a huge sleeper. Is what I would have said had the justice system not totally failed. 4 of his 22 receptions went for touchdowns last season. In addition to Chris Conley departing Kansas City, there's reason to believe that he can take the next step going into his 3rd year, considering he scored a touchdown in each of the last 3 games of the regular season. I'd pay attention to the Kansas City depth chart and preseason with Robinson in mind. If he can jump Watkins on the depth chart and separate himself from the crowded receiving core, the upside is significant. Remember, Kansas City drafted Mecole Hardman to replace Tyreek Hill. If everyone is healthy outside of Travis Kelce and Hill, there may not be enough passes to go around in that group. If Nick Foles plays well in Jacksonville, any of their receivers, Dede Westbrook, Marquise Lee, or Keelan Cole, could be mid to late round steals. My true sleeper though, the real sleeper guy, the pillow talker, is Lions receiver Kenny Golladay. Golden Tate is gone, making Golladay a true number 1 in Detroit, which we've seen pay huge dividends with Matt Stafford slinging the ball before. I expect Galladay's 70 receptions to jump to at least 90 as he enters season number 3. The Lions were awful last year, and I believe they will at the very least be average, which should also contribute to Golladay cracking the top 10 for fantasy receivers this year. In terms of top 10 from last year's performers for guys that I think could possibly fall into the top 20, you know what they say, if you're not top 10, you're not top 10, is I already mentioned Antonio Brown, but also Mike Evans. And not because I don't believe in Mike Evans. I think he's one of the best wide receivers in the league. But his offensive coordinator, Todd Monken, goes over to the Cleveland Browns. Byron Leftwich is his new offensive coordinator, and Jameis Winston needs a really good offensive coordinator, and I'm not sure Byron Leftwich is that yet. And I think Chris Godwin is going to take some balls from him, just like a real ball thief. Some of my question mark ball catchers are Larry Fitzgerald, Golden Tate, and Deshaun Jackson. Jackson and Tate switch teams this offseason and will have new quarterbacks, and Fitz gets a rookie quarterback for the second year in a row, which seems like a horrible punishment for one of the best receivers to play the game and a guy who also appears to be one of the nicest in football. Golden Tate's on his third team in less than a year, but he's the safest bet of the three, knowing that if Eli Manning goes down with an injury, the Giants have Eli Manning's clone to replace Eli Manning. Consistency. A rookie who could put up reliable numbers is Patriots first-round pick N'Keal Harry. Gronk is gone, which means Julian Edelman will be the focus of any competent defense, and the Pats are supposedly very high on Harry, as he's already listed as the starter on the depth chart. At 6'4", he's going to be the top target for Brady anytime Brady wants to throw the ball higher than, say, 5 feet 10 inches off of the ground. This could change, though, if Josh Gordon returns to the NFL and plays a full season, which I'm not sure even the Pats are counting on. Another guy to look at is Steelers 2018 second-round pick James Washington, aka Mr. Normal-Sized Chest, who gets to benefit from the departure of Antonio Brown. Well, the entire Steelers locker room gets the benefit from that departure, but James should reap the rewards on the field. Someone in Pittsburgh has to fill that number 2 role at wide receiver, and he's probably the best candidate to do that despite severely underperforming last year. AB had 168 targets last season, so you have to assume a lot of those end up going to Washington, who caught 16 passes for 217 yards and 1 touchdown. Eli Rogers or Dante Moncrief could assume that number 2 role, but my money is on Washington, especially because Rogers is in a contract year, and we all know how well the Steelers handle contracts. I also like the Buccaneers' Chris Godwin, who developed a nice chemistry with Jameis Winston, not easy to do, and had 3 100-plus yard games in the final 8 weeks. He's a bit of a boom or bust week-to-week player, but it helps that Bruce Arians said he's never coming off the field. Amari Cooper will not be wasted by the Raiders for the first 6 games this season and should produce like he did in 2015 and 16 as Dak's number 1 target during Prescott's contract year. Cooper, a much safer bet this season, I think. Now, receivers you should stay away from. Stay away from Tyreek Hill. Not in fantasy football, just in real life. I'd also avoid all of Buffalo's receivers as well, but for actual football reasons. And then there's Jarvis Landry, who wanted his former LSU teammate Odell Beckham Jr. in Cleveland with him. But that likely means Landry is going to see fewer targets this season, and Jarvis heavily relies on those PPR points. With Nick Chubb at running back, David Njoku at tight end, and Antonio Callaway as the third receiver, Baker Mayfield has plenty of options in Cleveland. And with some of last year's second-tier receivers, your 20 to 40 guys, I see Calvin Ridley falling probably well out of the top 100 if Julio Jones gets those 3,000 yards. Emmanuel Sanders, that is a huge question mark. Could be the number 1 guy in Denver, but coming back from an Achilles injury, too many question marks for me to make an educated guess. Pretty safe to say that Jordy Nelson is catching 0 fucking balls this year. And an interesting guy I think to keep an eye on is Allen Robinson. Definitely has the talent, and if you believe Mitch Trubisky is going to continue to improve, maybe get a little bit more consistent, he's a guy I think could get quite a few more catches this season. And finally, I see Sterling Shepard as a big dick riser. Big dick, get it? Anyway, with Beckham being gone, there's no way Golden Tate's taking all of the balls that would go to Beckham, and Sterling Shepard, one of the more underrated receivers in the league. But as always, remember, auto draft is probably your best friend in any fantasy football draft because the computer is smarter than your stupid brain. That's a look at fantasy receivers. Should I do some more fantasy football bids here on That's Good Sports? I can get a little more in depth on these things if you want. Wanted to do a test here, see if you liked it. If you don't, I'll piss off and I'll never talk about fantasy football again. But like I said, it's pretty easy. So I hope you want more. Thanks for watching another episode of That's Good Sports. Please subscribe here on YouTube. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, at Brandon Perna. And make sure you follow my writing partner, at Wilkie6 on Twitter. He helps me write so much. That's all he helps me do. But that's a big job, right?